All right. It says we are live, so I'm going to assume that we are live. Welcome, everyone, to the inaugural episode, the pilot, if you will, of the Cover One Roundup. I hear an echo. Sorry, but welcome to the inaugural episode of the Cover One Roundup here live on the Cover One YouTube channel. And if you're watching this subsequently, wherever you listen to your podcasts, I am Cover One lead correspondent Kyle Silagyi, joined by co-host / regular host Rob Quinn. Rob, what is this podcast all about? What are we doing here?
Well, now we have a full slate of podcasts at the Cover One Network. We're joining the Cover One Buffalo, The Hoof, Disguised Coverage, their fantasy show, to bring you another Buffalo Bills podcast. We are going to be live every Monday night at 9 p.m., rounding up the games, talking about what's going on in the week, any rumors, storylines, things of that nature, and really just looking forward to bringing you guys the most in-depth Buffalo Bills analysis you can find.
Rob summed it up pretty well there. Like he said, storylines, rumors, hot takes. We're going to have it all for you every Monday at 9 p.m., which is it's going to go really well in the season, because that's going to be like Monday morning quarterback stuff or Monday night quarterback stuff. But now off season, it's just kind of a random Monday night show. But hey, we'll make it entertaining for you. So before we jump into it, which is what we're going to do in a few minutes here, Rob, you and I, this is a bit of a reunion for us. We podcasted with each other back in the day. We worked with each other back in the day at Bills Wire. Great website, great time. But in preparation, I told you this off air. In preparation for this show, I listened to the last podcast that you and I made with each other.
Oof.
This was in, I think, April of 2018. Can you guess what the podcast topic was?
I was probably professing my love for one Josh Rosen, if I had to guess, and spewing the hottest takes about why Josh Allen should be nowhere near the Buffalo Bills. Am I close?
You're in the ballpark. Maybe not the ballpark. You're in the city that the team plays in. So it was about quarterbacks. We discussed Brandon Beane deciding to pay the roster bonus of Tyrod Taylor. And we went back and forth on if that meant he was getting traded or not.
Oh, man.
And I think ultimately we know what happened. But it's just a hell of a place to pick up here. Hell of a place to pick up 3 or 4 years later.
We haven't missed much since then. Right, it's the same old Bills. We know that.
Same old Bills. They haven't been to an AFC championship game or anything. So what we're going to do today, we are going to first start with the best named podcast segment in maybe the world, definitely in the Bills podcasting game. It is called the Roundup. It is where we look at the latest NFL Bills news and just quickly go over it, quickly give you our thoughts in a roundup fashion, because that makes sense. So, Rob, big news coming out of Arizona recently. Chandler Jones, perennial double-digit sack guy, one of the better pass rushers in the NFL, I would say. Also a Rochester native. He's a Western New York guy, the brother of John Bones Jones. He requested a trade away from the Arizona Cardinals. This has sent Bills Twitter into a frenzy. Can the Bills somehow find a way to bring Chandler Jones home? I don't know. Rob, what do you think?
See, now usually when players request a trade, I'm the first one to say, let's slow your roll. And that was my initial reaction when I saw that too. And I saw the Bills Twitter immediately going, bring Chandler Jones to Buffalo. And, but the more I thought about it, this is a move that would make sense for the Bills. I mean, in years past, we've seen it and it's like, okay, we're not taking on an aging veteran with a huge salary cap number, but this situation could be the move that puts the Bills not only into the Super Bowl, but wins the Super Bowl for them. Now, they used their last 3 top 2-round draft picks on defensive ends, but they are unproven. Opposite Jerry Hughes, we got A.J. Epinesa, Greg Rousseau, and Boogie Basham, who we're all super excited about. But Mario Addison, who started 7 games last year, really was underwhelming. He'll be 34. He restructured his contract, which makes things a little bit more difficult. But our Greg Tomset took a look at the numbers And it wouldn't be, obviously, it would take some maneuvering with the salary cap. Chandler Jones is due $15.5 million if traded, and the Bills only have $9.8 million in salary cap space. But the Deion Dawkins deal could be restructured. You might package a Vernon Butler or Mario Addison along with him. There's a couple moves that could be made. And I know that Peter King suggested to trade a first-round pick, which initially seems steep to me. But when you think about where the Bills are drafting, they're probably going to be picking between 27 and 32. And you give up that price for a 31-year-old. Now, he's coming off a bicep injury. But that's not something extremely serious that I think teams would really be cautioned about. And I think it's a move that they should probably look into. I'm interested to hear what you think about this.
I agree with you in principle. I think, like the ability is of no concern to me. Like I think Chandler Jones still has it. Like you said, coming off the bicep injury, but before that, his age 29 season was a career year, 19 sacks, and then he also had career highs in forced fumbles and stuff like that. So he is still an incredibly productive player. As I said before, perennial double-digit sack guy, would instantly be the Bills' best pass rusher. Certainly. And he's also, I know Eric was tweeting videos earlier from the @ManFreeCover1 account, I believe is the tweeting videos of just him impacting the games in other ways too. So he is a very impactful player, but it would take some all-time cap maneuvering from Brandon Beane to get this done. Like, as you said, Greg tweeted out some stuff. You'd have to include Addison and Obata. You'd have to restructure Dawkins, and then you'd have to extend Chandler Jones to a multi-year deal and move most of the money to past this year. But like, even in that case, is that an intriguing package for Arizona? Is Mario Addison plus Obata plus a day 2 pick? Does that get it done? If I'm Arizona, I'm like, I don't know if an older pass rusher and F.A. Obata, it gets it done for me.
Right. Obviously, it would come down to the draft capital. And the Cardinals are looking to compete this year. They are in a tough division, and they signed J.J. Watt. They signed A.J. Green. They made the moves on the offensive line. So it's difficult to see if they'd really entertain an offer for arguably their best player on defense at the moment. I don't think so, but this is the Cover One Roundup podcast, and we're going to discuss all the options. We got to talk about it. It's big news. It's fun to talk about. But yeah, I think it's something that Brandon Beane should definitely look into. But like you said, the Cardinals, they are probably less inclined to than the Bills.
Yeah, and for us, like as two people who write about the Bills consistently, it's like the perfect story. Just like, the dominant pass rusher coming to his hometown team to help it get over the hump and be the guy that helps it win a Super Bowl. I just don't know if the Bills can do it. I don't know if they have the assets for it. They have the assets, and Brandon Beane isn't afraid to be aggressive. Like we saw the Stephon Diggs trade, and just in general, he's a pretty aggressive general manager. I don't see it happening. Somebody wrote it in our Slack, I think yesterday. It's a Madden move. It's and like, just because he requested a trade doesn't necessarily mean he's going to get traded. Like you said, Arizona wants to be competitive. They went out there and made moves. They got J.J. Watt to come in and play opposite Chandler Jones, not to replace Chandler Jones. So, like, I don't know if they're going to move him. And if they do, I don't know if the Bills have the capital to make it happen. So is there any other roundup stuff other than the Bills are reporting to camp, which leads us into our storylines?
I don't think so. But before we go any further, we just got to bring up our awesome partner over at Underdog Fantasy. We have partnered with them for the season. It's a new fantasy app where you could play player props. They do best ball drafts. So if you're looking to win some money, download the Underdog Fantasy app, and you can use the code COVER1, and they will match your deposit up to $25. Kyle, have you downloaded the app or gotten into any drafts yet with Underdog?
I have not yet, but this is going to be the year that I dedicate myself to fantasy football in all forms. Usually very bad at it because I'm just a passive player. I'll draft a team and then I will forget about it. Then I'll check at the end of the season and be like, oh, I had good players. I just didn't pay attention. So maybe this will be the year that I get into it. And if I get into it, it will certainly be with Underdog Fantasy. Thank you for remembering to do that, Rob. That's big.
Of
So we will now move into storylines, the meat and potatoes of the Cover One Roundup, at least this episode of it. So Rob and I are going to break down 4 total storylines, 2 apiece. The 4 maybe biggest storylines, or at least most intriguing storylines to us as training camp kicks off here. So Rob, I'll kick it over to you. What is your biggest storyline as we enter training camp here this week?
Well, we just talked about Chandler Jones, so I'm going to keep it on the defensive line. The Bills have a lot riding on this defensive line this year. They were 15th in sacks. They really need to get their pass rush up to where it was, but they also need to get better at defending the run. We know Star Lotulelei is back, but I want to make sure that fans aren't just like, oh, Star's back, the middle is set. Ed Oliver is going to have 10 sacks. Tremaine Edmonds going to have 250 tackles. He hasn't played football for a year, so how he looks in camp is going to be very big. How Harrison Phillips is coming along. Now, I know you spoke to him about his journey coming back from the ACL injury. That's huge, and how the rest of the defensive tackle position shakes out. And then also at edge rusher, Jerry Hughes has been the constant there. He's still extremely productive. But how is AJ Epinesa going to look now that he has a full off season at his new playing weight? Leslie Frazier said he looks like a completely different player, and physically he does, but I would like to see how he fares against the run after losing nearly 30 pounds. Then you have Gregory Rousseau, first-round draft pick. Everyone knows about him. Not only how is he going to look, but where are they going to line him up? That's, I think, is extremely interesting to me. He's 6'6", 260 pounds, and he's young. He's still growing into that massive frame. Miami used him a lot all over the defensive line. And I'm interested to see how early Buffalo's coaching staff works him in as an interior player. Do they want him to learn several positions at once, or do they really want him to settle in on the edge and kind of work into that rotation as he develops? And then you have Boogie Basham, the second-round draft pick. I'm really interested to see where they use him as well, another versatile player. And then you have the other guys rounding out the team. F.A. Obata is extremely interesting. Where Addison fits into all this, seemingly that he's essentially locked into a spot after his restructure. So there's a lot riding on this defensive line, and it is an intense training camp battle. And I can't forget to bring up your guy, Daryl Johnson.
Thank you. I was gonna.
I wouldn't be.
I wouldn't kick you from the stream, but I would have. It was going through my head.
Yeah, and just where these guys can fill in on special teams, and just how many are they going to keep? Like, this is a deep roster, and I'm really interested to see how it all shakes out. And we'll start hopefully by next week. We'll have a little bit of an answer.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to say this is a make or break year for the defensive line, because that really wouldn't make sense. But it's just it's going to be interesting to see how this defensive line shapes up in training camp and the regular season in general, because it's a unit that I don't want to say was like a complete failure last year, but it struggled against the run, and it struggled to get pass rush going, like pass rushing production. Like, obviously they were fine in pressures. Like, if you look at advanced stats and against the run and everything, and it's like, okay, maybe they weren't that bad, but just,
watching the games, you see it. I remember Darrell Henderson just ripping off
exactly
8, 9, 10-yard runs at a time. And it's just in those critical moments, they could not get the stops that they needed. And the defensive line has intriguing players.
Mm-hmm.
There's something special about every single one of these players that they have on a defensive line, but they haven't been able to consistently produce at a high level. And they flashed, but you need to have that consistency. And that's what I'm looking to see, is how they can gel, how quickly, and how they can carve out roles. Because right now, it's exciting to say, oh, Greg Rousseau can play nose tackle, 1 tech, 3 tech, 5 tech, 7 tech. Sure, he has the skill set where he can, but where is he good, and where is he going to wreak the havoc that you need your first-round draft pick to wreak the havoc from? That's what I'm concerned to see. We know Jerry Hughes is going to get the pressures and get in the backfield, but who's going to be the guy to step up alongside him on that defensive line and make quarterbacks miserable? Because we saw the Tampa Bay Buccaneers do it with Jason Pierre-Paul and Vita Vea and Shaq Barrett. Mm-hmm. They were harassing quarterbacks all season long. And the Bills need that desperately if they want to unseat the Chiefs.
Yeah, and I'm also just intrigued to see how the line responds to the offseason. Because that, like, if I had to pinpoint one position group this offseason that Brandon Beane really devoted his time and effort to improving, it's the defensive line. I mean, just look at, he made a few under the radar free agent signings like F.A. Obata, who, I mean, Cover One, I feel like everyone at Cover One loves F.A. Obata, thinks he's a very intriguing player. And then in the draft, back-to-back picks, first and second round, goes defensive end. So Brandon Beane has a very specific type of defensive end that he likes. Kind of the power guy. It doesn't really focus all that much on speed rushers, kind of likes the power guys. But it's going to be interesting to see now that he's loaded up on them. Is the line going to respond? Has the line reached its final form? I guess is what I'm trying to say here. Like, has he done enough in the offseason to, put the stuttering here. This is live. Has he done enough in the offseason to fix what was the biggest issue on the defense, in my opinion? Has he added enough players through free agency, through the draft, and how will the line respond to that new influx of talent? I guess is just just my biggest thing going into training camp here on the defensive line. So anything to wrap up on the D line before we move to the offensive side of the ball quickly?
I think that covers it. You said it well. It's just how they're going to respond with all the new bodies in there. A few hiccups, but overall.
All right. So my most intriguing storyline as we move into training camp here is the receiving core, and not the top of the receiving core, because it's pretty much set in stone what the top of the receiving core is going to look like. Stephon Diggs, Emmanuel Sanders, Cole Beasley. Maybe not. But Gabriel Davis, those are the top four guys, obviously, as we enter camp here. And then on the rest of the roster, there's, 5 or 6 other receivers who are competing for 2 or 3 spots, realistically. The Bills carried, I'm not sure how many they carried last season, but for most games, they had 6 or 7 active. Some weeks they had 5, but it was mostly 6, and then the occasional 7. So there's, as I said, 6 or 7 guys fighting for 3 roster spots. So what I'm intrigued to see as we enter camp here is, do we see anyone jump out quickly and really get a stranglehold on one of those spots? Or do we see many guys jump out quickly? Or is this something that'll be decided in training camp? For me, the front runner right now, or at least the front runners, are Isaiah McKenzie, who, I mean, fan favorite. Everyone knows Isaiah McKenzie at this point. Gadget guy. There's been a lot of Isaiah McKenzie hype recently, especially with the whole Cole Beasley saga going on. People are saying, I've seen some takes that Isaiah McKenzie is the best slot receiver on the Bills. I wholeheartedly disagree with that, and I very much like Isaiah McKenzie. I don't think he's a better slot receiver than Cole Beasley, but that's not to say that he's not good. Like, Isaiah McKenzie has a role on this team, and he's coming in probably as the favorite to win the returner job. Kick and punt returner, probably. At least he's going to compete for it, probably with Marquez Stevenson. So I think he's on the roster bubble, but if you ask me right now, I would say he's probably going to make the roster just because he's been around, longest tenured Bills receiver. Dable likes him, does a lot in that offense, plays a variety of roles. I think he's a guy who is going to make the roster. Also, the other Isaiah, I think, is pretty much a roster lock, despite the opposite of Isaiah McKenzie. We've never seen him. We don't know, what his role is in the Bills offense, but we have an idea. But Isaiah Hodgins missed last season with an injury, or he was on injured reserve at least. But I think that Isaiah Hodgins probably is a roster lock just because he is an intriguing player. I think Josh Allen's already been hyping him up. You wrote a piece on that. He's getting that offseason rub, if you will. He's kind of not the offseason darling, but there's a lot of Bills fans who are hyped to see what Isaiah Hodgins can offer to this offense. And then, when you compare him to the other players at the bottom of this receiving core, he offers something different, especially when compared to McKenzie or Stevenson or Brandon Powell. Is that a name? Brandon Powell? There's a Powell. I know that for sure. Brandon Powell. And then Marquez Stevenson, late round rookie, out of Houston, Ed Oliver's college roommate, I believe. Another intriguing guy going to compete with Isaiah McKenzie for that returner job, probably for a roster spot with Isaiah McKenzie. If Marquez Stevenson just comes in and is a better version of Isaiah McKenzie, which is kind of what I think that their long-term hope is. I think they're kind of hoping that Marquez Stevenson is going to replace Isaiah McKenzie as early as this year, if not this year, then next year. But we'll see if he can, come in training camp and carve out a role there. And then you got other guys like Jake Kumerow, who, if Brandon Beane is not on the phone with the Green Bay Packers right now trying to get a day 2 pick for Jake Kumerow, I don't know what he's doing. Just say Kumerow for a 2nd round pick and Rodgers will be there tomorrow. That's right. How you fix it. You don't need Randall Cobb. Jake Kumerow's better, maybe. Then Tanner Gentry. I don't see Tanner Gentry making this roster. I would say Josh Allen could make him in preseason, but if Tanner Gentry sees the field with Josh Allen in preseason, we have major issues. Something went horribly wrong along the way. Duke Williams I don't know if there's still Duke Williams hype. I think Bills Mafia has found new offseason darlings. Then Brandon Powell, Lance Lenoir, French name. Yeah, but realistically, there's 6 guys competing for 3 roster spots, maybe 2 roster spots, and I think the guys who are going to fill those roster spots, I think it's pretty clear. But I'm interested to see if Jay Kumerow or a Tanner Gentry can come in and compete with an Isaiah Hodgins, or if Marquez Stevenson can usurp Isaiah McKenzie and leave him off the roster. So, Rob, as we enter training camp here, what are your opinions on the bottom of the receiving core?
Yeah, I think you broke it down great. I think obviously Isaiah McKenzie has a head start on everyone else. Like you said, he's the longest tenured Bills receiver, which is fascinating.
It's crazy,
to say the least.
Literally, sorry, just going to interrupt you, but he was just a waiver claim because the Bills got killed on special teams by Tariq Cohen. Yeah. In 2018, and Beane was just like, okay, yeah, we need a Tariq Cohen-like player. Isaiah McKenzie, 3 years later, we're still talking about him on the roster. Crazy.
But yeah, so Marquez Stevenson, I think, is Isaiah McKenzie's sole competition. Like you said, the Bills want him to be that better version of him. I don't think Isaiah McKenzie is a full-time offensive player yet, and I think the contract that he signed as an unrestricted free agent shows that. Coming back on a 1-year, $1 million deal. On Tyler Dunn's happy hour, he was on there and he was talking. And he seemed pretty upset about it, basically saying that he didn't get enough touches or enough time to showcase himself. And I think what he did in the offense is what he would do just about anywhere in the NFL right now. Be that gadget guy, the jet sweeps, the reverses, maybe offer a little bit in the return game, but essentially be that gadget, small, shifty player that can get you those chunks of yards on trick plays. I don't think he's better than Cole Beasley in the slot. I don't know where that take came from, but it's from
the national people.
Oh yeah, that haven't really watched the team, but Marquez Stevenson is very intriguing to me. And obviously Isaiah Hodgins as well. And those are 2 completely different players, right? Hodgins is that big 6'4", quick, lanky receiver that can really win over the middle, which is what he did at Oregon State, earning 2nd team All Pac-12. And then you look at Jake Kumerow, the one pass he caught last year on that just dart from Josh Allen against the Broncos. And obviously people know Kumerow more from Rodgers being disappointed in losing him than what he's done with the Bills. But I think there's promise there, and the teams that continuously claim him on waivers show that there is a market for him. And I think that Brandon Beane will have to pull one of those swaps for a late day pick during camp just because of the numbers. But it's going to be really interesting to watch just how these receivers shake out in camp. And like you said, someone's going to have to steal that job early in the preseason and prove that they can make a difference. Because I think right now Isaiah McKenzie and Marquez Stevenson are gunning for the return jobs. And then if you're looking for an actual receiver, it's going to be Hodgins or Kumerow that makes the team.
Jake Kumerow is just such an interesting player right now.
Right.
For, in large part, not in large part, but due in part to the whole Aaron Rodgers situation. Mm-hmm. But just everyone has talked about it at Cover One, in articles, we write it all the time, but just we have gone, or the Bills have gone in 3 years from do we have 53 NFL caliber players to we're going to have to cut a number of NFL caliber players. And with Jay Kumro, he's an NFL wide receiver, I think. Not a top tier guy, not, a 1 or a 2, but I think he can, he's a rosterable player. I just don't know if he's good enough for this roster, which is crazy because he's not going to get on the practice squad again. I simply don't think he'd be able to.
Yeah, you're not going to sneak Kumaro onto the practice squad. Like I said, he either makes the 53 or you're trading him. Yeah, right. Exactly.
And then can the Bills trade Duke Williams? Is there a market for Duke Williams yet?
That ship has sailed, I think. We got Clifford Mail who says it would be a shock if Isaiah McKenzie is not on the final 53. He could play subpar in camp and preseason, but someone would have to blow them away to supplant McKenzie. That's interesting. And I think you're probably leaning towards that. Am I wrong?
I agree to an extent, but I go back to the contract. If they were married to Isaiah McKenzie, would they have let him test the market for 2 weeks and then give him a league minimum deal? Mm-hmm. Would they? I mean, you can say Isaiah McKenzie,
and then draft him your identical player.
Exactly. You could say Isaiah McKenzie came back because he wanted to win a Super Bowl, so he took a cheap deal, and it's yeah, but it was a consensual thing. The Bills still gave him a near, if not league minimum deal. So I don't know if the Bills love Isaiah McKenzie as much as Bills fans love Isaiah McKenzie. I think they like him. I think he plays a role in the offense. We've seen that for years now. He certainly has a role on this team. But if Marquez, is it Marquez or Marquez? I'll say Marquez. If Marquez Stevenson comes in and shows that he can do what McKenzie does, even at a similar level, I think the edge goes to Stevenson because he was drafted and he has term. You don't have to worry about re-signing him at the end of the year. So I'm actually going to disagree with that take there. I think even if Stevenson is comparable to McKenzie, the edge goes to Stevenson.
I agree.
Does that wrap up receiver talk there? I mean, I think there's a possibility for 5, 6. No, there's not. One of them's going to get cut. McKenzie, Hodgins, or Stevenson are going to get cut, along with Kumaro, Gentry, Williams, etc. We'll have to see. We'll have to see how training camp goes. I think it's down to McKenzie and Stevenson for that final roster spot at receiver, and it sucks because McKenzie's been a very good player for years, and I'm just here oh yeah, Hodgins just supplanted him on the depth chart, but he just offers something different. They didn't draft a guy with the same skill set as Hodgins. They drafted a guy with the same skill set as Stevenson. Or as McKenzie, sorry. So, Rob, we're staying on the offensive side of the ball for your second storyline as we enter training camp.
Right. I'm going to keep it in the trenches and look at the offensive line. Most notably the guard positions. Number one, I don't think John Feliciano is as locked in as many Bills fans will believe. And I also don't think Cody Ford is locked into that left guard job either. John Feliciano is really a fan favorite, and he gives a lot to this team in terms of his competitiveness, his toughness, his ability in the run game. But he doesn't really do it for me. I think he's serviceable. And now Cody Ford, on the other hand, has not shown anything since being in this league. The Bills traded up for him in the second round to be their right tackle. He split time with Ty Nsekhe at right tackle and was dreadful when he was on the field. He was moved to left guard last season and was pretty terrible in that spot until he got injured in practice, tore his meniscus. Ike Becker came in, and I thought he played well. He was not a mauler. He's not a world beater. He's not going to be a Quentin Nelson, but he gets the job done. Yeah. And Eric Turner attended Bobby Johnson's cool clinic, and he really talked up Butker, talking about his technique, and he was the star student in his clinic. And I think that for offensive line coaches, when you don't have a guy with all pro potential like a Quentin Nelson or those type of guys around the league, you want a guy that's going to execute what you're telling them to execute. And maybe it's not at a world-class level, but you're not getting destroyed or blowing assignments or just completely whiffing, which is what we've seen a lot of Cody Ford do throughout his short career so far. So I think Ike Butker actually isn't the front runner for the job just because Cody Ford is that high draft pick that they gave up assets to get. But I think Butker is probably the 1B to Cody Ford's 1A. And then you have guys like Forrest Lamp. They drafted Jack Anderson. So there's pieces there. And I don't think either of the two spots are really locked in right now. Obviously, the depth chart going into camp, everyone's talking about the continuity and they're bringing the 5 starters back. But I think there's room for both starters to be supplanted as training camp goes on, should one of those backups step up and prove themselves.
I agree. And unfortunately, I don't think we're going to know who's starting on the offensive line for a bit here, for at least a couple of weeks into training camp, because the team likes to hide stuff. So I think if they can hide who's the starting 5 on the offensive line, that is something that they're going to hide at least early. But I agree. Like Brandon Beane said after the season, which is kind of leads into my storyline a bit, but I won't transition yet, that he didn't want to blame the lack of success in the run game exclusively on the running backs. There was multiple factors, one of which was blocking. And, guards guards do a lot in the run game. That doesn't take advanced analysis to tell you that. So they could definitely stand to improve at the guard positions. So if you had to guess, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here. Obviously, training camp, early days here, a lot can happen. But week 1, who do you think the starting 5 is on the offensive line?
Deion Dawkins, Ike Butker, Mitch Morse, Cody Ford, Darrell Williams.
You just dunked on Cody Ford for
no, I know. I think
for 3 minutes straight, and now you're like, oh, he's gonna win the job.
Yeah, I think they have to start him at least early on. I don't think it's guaranteed, but if I had to guess, they would. My own opinion is that he's not a starting caliber player, and I really hope I'm wrong. But I think that they're going to give him every opportunity to lose that job, whereas the other guys are going to have to win it.
Where do you think Ryan Bates factors into all this?
I think they like him a lot. He's played everywhere on the offensive line since he's got to Buffalo, and I think he's a sleeper for everyone to watch. Obviously, he's the backup center, but I wouldn't be surprised for him to push for one of those spots either. But right now at guard, I'd say it's obviously Feliciano and Ford's job to lose, but I am not sleeping on Butker, and I know a lot of people are high on Forrest Lamp as well, but we'll see how that works out.
I think that wraps up offensive line takes. I mean, I don't have any offensive line takes. I'm sorry. I just haven't thought about it long enough yet. But no, I agree. I'm not as low on Feliciano as you are. I don't like him. Well, that sounds rude. Like, I'm not in love. I don't think he's a world beater, as you said. Like, I don't think he's a replacement level player, but I think he's a serviceable guard. And we'll see if Ike Butker, again, he's been around forever. He was a UDFA in like 2018, and he's just kind of stuck around. I think he was in Kansas City for a little bit, and they brought him back even. So they like Ike Butker. So we'll see if this is the year where he enters the season with a starting job. That's a realistic possibility, I do believe. And Cody Ford, I mean, he's one of those guys where it's like he can play multiple positions, but he's not very good at any of them. And he might come at me on Twitter. He does that to people. But I don't know if he enters the season with the starting job. I mean, you see more. That's the thing. You're harsher on Cody Ford than I am, but you're more confident that he'll enter the season with a starting job than I am.
I just think based on like the traits and the investment they put into him and the lack of real talent, like there's no guy behind him with the traits that say, oh, this guy can be a beast at guard, but there's serviceable guys behind him, and that might be enough to push him. But I just think Ford is going to be given every opportunity to lose the job.
I agree with that. And Greg Thompson comes in with the hottest take. It's going to be hotter than either of our hot takes in the hot take section. He writes, 3 nice strangers at a restaurant. Ryan Bates plays all 5 positions. Greg butts into whisper. Yes, but none of them well. Wow. They've invested how much time into Ryan Bates?
Years.
They traded Eli Harold for Ryan Bates. Who won the trade? That's what we discuss on the Cover One Roundup. Who won the Eli Harold for Ryan Bates trade? Staying on the offensive side of the ball, again, we're going to switch to the running back room. Again, this is going to be interesting, especially this week. I don't know if we're going to get the information this week, but some people are going to see it, and I hope I find out who is getting the lion's share of touches at running back. Is it Zach Moss or is it Devin Singletary? Devin Singletary, I feel like a lot of people, it's like a 50-50 split, I feel like, in the fan base when it comes to Devin Singletary. There are some people who thinks he still has a lot of promise, who see what he did in his rookie year and think last year was a down year, see what he did in the offseason, completely transformed, is looking absolutely jacked now. There are a lot of people who still think he can be a starting NFL running back, or if not starting, the 1A in a running back by committee. And then there is Zach Moss, who kind of dealt with some injury issues last year, especially in the wild card game, right? He got injured again. But I would tend to lean towards Zach Moss as the 1A in that running back room. I think that Zach Moss has the better tools to be a bell cow back. Again, I think they're still going to do a running back by committee. I don't think that one of them is going to be this, the starter and get, 30 touches a game. I don't think that's going to happen, especially in this offense. But I think that Zach Moss has the better tools and the higher ceiling. I think that he is better positioned to be the number 1 running back in this running back by committee, just because I think Singletary is better served as a change of pace guy, right? He has good patience, decent vision, but he just doesn't have that top end speed that I want in my starting running back. Neither does Zach Moss, but Zach Moss makes up for it in other areas, whereas in my opinion, Devin Singletary does not. I like Singletary, but not as my number 1 back. I like Zach Moss better. My wild card for this running back room and for the offseason in general is not Christian Wade. It's a different running back. It's Matt Breida. I could see Matt Breida being off the roster just as easily as I could see him having a significant role in the offense, because they don't really make 3 actual running backs active per game. They've never done that. They'll do the 2 and then Taiwan Jones or a special teamer. They really don't have 3 actual running backs active at any particular time, which is why I'm leaning towards Breida being off the roster, because they could do a TJ Yeldon with him, keep him around and make him inactive every week. But I like Matt Breida. I think he maybe not top end speed, but he's a fast player, decent receiving option. I think like a quarter of his yards in his career have come off of receptions, and like half of his touchdowns have come off receptions. But he's not like running routes out of the backfield, but it's like, off screen passes, stuff near the line of scrimmage. And his vision, I kind of praise Devin Singletary's vision a bit, but Matt Breida has some very good vision, elite level vision, I would say. So it's going to be interesting to see the role that Matt Breida plays. We're not going to see it in training camp, or we might hear reports of it in training camp. And, in preseason, we'll see if he can make an impact. But like I said, I like Matt Breida. I think if he's given the opportunity, his roster spot might come at the expense of another receiver, just because how they would use him or how ideally they would use him. But I don't really see it happening, just because, they could use that roster spot for something else, as opposed to a running back who's going to play 5 or 6 snaps a game in a change of pace role. And then you got other guys, Taiwan Jones, who's a special teamer. I don't want to talk about him in the running back preview, but he's going to make the roster because he's an A special teamer. Christian Wade, we would have a bigger discussion about Christian Wade, I'm sure, had his international pathway program exemption stuff not been extended for another year. I think he can have another year on the practice squad this year. So I'm sure they're going to do that if they can. I really don't see. I mean, maybe he's learned how to play football in the last 2 years, and we see that in training camp. But as of right now, I can't bang the table for Christian Wade. I cannot in good conscience do that. And then Antonio Williams. Again, he's a guy who was on and off the practice squad all year last year. It seemed like twice a week I was getting text notifications, Bills cut Antonio Williams, Bills re-sign Antonio Williams. And it's like, where's the guy going? Like, is he leaving every time? I feel bad. I feel bad. He's got some great, mileage rewards from Delta if he's, flying to wherever he lives each and every time he gets cut. He can go on a nice vacation. But Antonio Williams, he finally got his chance in week 17. Again, it was against the Dolphins in garbage time. I don't want to say it like the Dolphins are a bad team. They were pretty good last year, but not Josh Allen kind of owns them, always has. But Antonio Williams in garbage time looked pretty good. Did he look good enough that, off of a half of football, I can say he's going to make the roster? No, but if he can string those days together in training camp and he can string those games together in the preseason, I mean, he could easily usurp Matt Breida. I don't know if he's going to push Zach Moss or Devin Singletary for the job, and it's going to take not a miracle, but it's going to take some effort, which he's going to put in. But it's going to take a lot for him to carve out a roster spot, especially if they're carrying 4 backs or 3 backs even. It's going to take a lot for Antonio Williams to make his way onto the 53, but it could be done. So just what are your opinions on the running back room? Who do you think gets the lion's share of the touches, if there is a guy who gets a lion's share of the touches? And Matt Breida, am I right or wrong?
There's a lot to unpack here with the running back group, and it's very similar to the bottom of the receivers, right? I mean, we're looking at guys who all bring something different to the table. We're bringing Singletary, who is that shifty, elusive guy. He had a promising rookie year, averaging over 5 yards a carry, but that was more in like a zone-based blocking scheme. Last year, they switched to more of a gap scheme, and as the season went on, Zach Moss started eating into Singletary's touches and carries. Obviously, the injuries hampered him a bit, but I think the team likes what they see in Zach Moss, and they started to rely on him in big-time situations as the year went on. Most notably to me in the Patriots and Steelers game, as time was running out, they used him to kind of eat up the clock and get first downs. And I think that they're going to trend towards Moss as the season goes on. To me, the running back room is tough because while I like what Zach Moss brings and I like what Singletary adds, they don't have a true number one running back.
No, it's going to be by committee.
Right. It definitely is. And it's going to be tough for a team that needs to run the ball better. Obviously, Brandon Beane believes a lot of that was on blocking, or he would have made a move in the offseason to bring someone in that was a little more accomplished than a Matt Breida, who I do like in a role. But like you said, where does he fit? They're probably not keeping 4 running backs with Taiwan Jones listed as a running back. And if they do keep Breida, it's going to have to be in place of an Isaiah McKenzie or a Marquez Stevenson, because that's the role that he's going to have to play if he wants to make this team and be a regular contributor. Antonio Williams, I obviously love what I saw from him against the Dolphins as much as anyone else, but in garbage time against a team that had their bags packed, ready to
defeated,
go, just utterly defeated, you need to look at that from both sides and say, okay, like we need to see more in live competition, which we'll have the opportunity to do in the preseason and training camp. But this is a really interesting group to watch because while it is a running back committee, you would like to see someone step up and be consistent when it comes to taking those lead back carries. I mean, obviously it's going to come down to 50-50 probably statistically by the end of the season, but where these guys get their carries, whether it's early down, late in the games, on the goal line, which is obviously Zach Moss's bread and butter, but you want to see a guy that can consistently pick up the yards that you need and make chunk plays, because you can't rely, as much as we'd love to have Josh Allen have the season that he did last year and just dice defenses up. Defenses are going to have some sort of an answer for him, and if they can't run the ball, which they weren't able to do in the playoffs, it's going to be a problem. And we'll be sitting here next year talking about the same thing.
We have 2 questions in the chat from Les Brown here. Can Antonio Williams take a Taiwan Jones special team spot? I don't think the Miami game was garbage time for them. Weren't they in the playoff hunt? They were, but they were dealt with in the first half. So, like, by the time Antonio Williams got in, the game was over for the most part. And can Antonio Williams take Jones' special team spot? I don't know. I haven't seen Antonio Williams on special teams, whereas Taiwan Jones is a guy who they, brought in to initially play special teams and then brought him in again 2 years later to play special teams. So they obviously like what he brings on teams there. I know he was a captain in 2018 as a special teamer. So I think Taiwan Jones brings too much to that team, special teams wise, too much that Antonio Williams, I do not see a scenario where he overtakes him as a special teamer. And then we have a question: can Breida line up as a wide receiver? I mean, he can, but I don't know if you should do it. Like, I suppose Gerald Johnson could line up as a wide receiver if that's where they put him. But I that's not where I would play him. I would use Breida as a change of pace guy not necessarily out of the backfield, but a guy where you can just get the ball to him in space, just kind of leave him around the line of scrimmage as a check down option, and then let Breida do the rest if Allen chooses to get it to him. But like if they wanted to use Breida, in the slot and then use him in a McKenzie role, on end arounds and stuff like that, I don't see why he couldn't do it. I think he's a good enough player to do that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Breida, like you said, is going to be that change of pace guy. And if he does make the team, he'll have to do a lot of the same things that Isaiah McKenzie did last year on offense.
It's a lot of Matt Breida talk for the Cover One Roundup inaugural episode here. So now we are going to move on to our final segment, I would say. This segment's going to be loved. It's also going to be hated, depending on what your personality is, and also depending on what we're talking about in a certain week. It's the hot take section. It's the section where we give hot takes. So it's aptly named. It's an aptly named section. So Rob, I'll put the burner under you for now. What is your hot take for this week?
We're heating up, and this take's going to take a little bit of time until it's fully cooked. But I do believe that Harrison Phillips takes over for Star Lotulelei as the team's starting one technique pretty early in the season. This isn't as much to discredit Star Lotulelei as it is to give praise to Harrison Phillips. You talked to him in an awesome piece, awesome interview with him, and you really talked about his recovery from that ACL injury and just what he had to go through to play last year. Even though he was healthy, he really wasn't 100% because the day after surgery, he's in physical therapy and already getting back to work. Yeah. So he was really worn down, and now you see him this offseason, and he is jacked. Mm-hmm. And he's entering a contract year, and I think this is the year that everything comes together for him, and he becomes – I think he's going to start as that third defensive tackle, and eventually he's going to be starting alongside Ed Oliver because I don't think there's going to be a way to keep him off the field. I think he does too much, both as a pass rusher but also as that interior two-gapper that can eat up double teams and allow guys to make plays around him. I think we started to see flashes of that towards the end of last season, but I think that he is going to put it all together this year, and it's going to be big for him.
Yeah, I think I agree. Like, this kind of feels like the perfect storm for Harrison Phillips, with him coming back from that, finally being 100% from that injury. Because, like you said, in the piece or in the interview that I had with him, I talked to him, and he said, like, yeah, he was on the field, but like he just saw little things that like his body wasn't responding, or like his body wasn't there to answer the call to what he thought he could do mentally. And it's just like there was stuff that he couldn't replicate in training. Like he could hold his body weight, like he could jump out of, he could do training, but like when it came time to the game and there were 200-300-pound guys trying to block him, you just can't replicate that force in training. It's impossible to do. So and he struggled. I mean, he said that himself. He struggled out of the gate, was made inactive for a couple of weeks. But then as the season progressed, he was starting to come on, starting to look like that player that we saw at the end of the 2019 season. There we go. I know years. I know math. So he was starting to once again look like that player that showed so much promise. And now with Star coming back from having a year off, from not playing football for a year, I mean, this is training camp and preseason is the time for Harrison Phillips to take that step, to show like, I was here last year. I wasn't 100% and I gave you everything I had. And then by the end of the year, I showed you that I can still be this player. So, let him make up for lost time, I guess. Let him, I think he does want to show the team that he can be the guy who can start at one tech, who can usurp Star Lotulelei. And I think he has the ability to do so. And I don't know if he will, but I think he will. Or I think he can. I don't know if he will, but I think he certainly has the potential to do so. And like I said, it's the perfect storm. Everything seems to be coming into a place here. So here is my hot take. It's a big one. I know, the people come to this podcast this week for my Jake Fromm takes. That this is going to be a staple of the podcast, the stalwart segment, the Jake Fromm take. Are you ready for this? It's a sad one too.
I'm ready.
I don't think that Jake Fromm will be with the team in any way come week 1. Hear me out. I know you're holding back tears. I am as well. It's a hard pill to swallow for sure, but hear me out. So Jake Fromm last year was the COVID quarterback. He was like a 5th round pick. I think he was a 5th round pick, right?
Yeah.
I didn't love him out of Georgia. I don't think anyone loved him out of Georgia. Just not the most exciting player. Maybe not even an exciting player. It's just kind of the definition, not the definition of dink and dunk, but he's a play it safe guy in my opinion. Not in the Josh Allen mold. Certainly not from the Josh Allen school of quarterbacking, if you will. I think the goal was for him to come in and kind of learn not only from Allen but from Matt Barkley, and kind of use that year as a developmental year, a redshirt year, if you will, and then take over as the backup this season. Obviously, COVID kind of threw the whole world into a tailspin, and it definitely threw the Bills' plan into a tailspin. And he was the COVID quarterback, didn't really practice with the team at all. I don't believe he practiced with the team at all last year. So that plan was thwarted. He is certainly not ready to take over as the backup quarterback this year. We saw that with the signing of Mitch Trubisky. So now the Bills are left with 4 quarterbacks. They might have an extra guy that I can't remember his name, but
Davis Webb.
Well, yeah, I was going to say with Davis Webb, who's kind of a coach on the field. I know not on the field. He doesn't play on the field. He hasn't seen the field, but he's kind of an extra coach. I think Matt Perino had a piece on that earlier in the offseason about how Davis Webb played a role that nobody really knew about in the Bills' run to the AFC Championship game last year. So with Josh Allen, who is the undisputed starter, if he doesn't start, I don't want to watch the Bills anymore. Mitch Trubisky, who is, if chaos ensues and Josh Allen gets hurt, he's the guy who's going in. And then you look at the options between Fromm and Webb. Do you want the COVID quarterback who hasn't practiced with the team yet, or do you want the extension of the coaching staff? I would rather have Davis Webb. And I would say they're not going to roster 3 quarterbacks, but I think they have in every year that Bean and McDermott have been here. I think they have rostered 3 quarterbacks. So that's not really an accurate take. But with the roster being as strong as it is right now, and we talked about this off air, but when it comes down to that 53rd roster spot being between an F.A. Obata or a Marquez Stevenson and Jake Fromm, who are you saving? It's obvious. I don't need to ask you the question. But Davis Webb also isn't making the roster, so it's going to come down to who's on the practice squad, Webb or Fromm. You could put both on the practice squad, but do you want two quarterbacks on your 16-man practice squad? I don't. I think there's other positions I would rather address. I just really don't see an NFL future for Jake Fromm other than backup quarterback. And like, I can find Jake Fromm in the 5th round again, I think. Like, I don't need to develop him. I don't need to keep 3 quarterbacks on my Super Bowl caliber roster or 2 quarterbacks on my practice squad when I have other spots, other positions I could fill those spots with. So I think that Jake Fromm is the odd man out. And we saw in minicamp, I think Marcel Louis Jacques reported that there was at least one day when Jake Fromm was like noticeably bad. So I really, again, don't hold me to this. I don't know. I reserve the right to change my mind come Wednesday or, come the end of the week when we see Jake Fromm play. But as of right now, if you ask me, will Jake Fromm be a Bill come week 1? No, he's either a free agent or I'm sure some team will snatch him up on the practice squad. He's a good practice squad hand, I think. But when you already have Davis Webb, who's been here for longer and has a more defined role on this team, I just, again, and this doesn't seem like a hot take, right? Like, oh, they're going to cut their 5th round pick from a year ago. Great hot take, Kyle. Hey, it's the first episode. Give me a break. Jake Fromm takes are always hot takes. So, what do you think about Jake Fromm? Do you have any opinions? Do you like him as a person?
See, I'm not a big fan of him as a quarterback, obviously, and we're not worried about Jake Fromm coming in and competing for Josh Allen's job, right? But we are looking at the future of the backup quarterback position. And Mitch Trubisky, the Bills lucked into because they wanted him. They get the best backup quarterback in the league, obviously, and he's gone next year. So that also leaves them with a need at backup quarterback going into the 2022 season. So that's the only thing I'm wondering, if the Bills do like what they have in Fromm and he's learning the offense. Obviously, he's a completely different quarterback than Josh Allen.
Yeah.
But like you said, you could probably find another Jake Fromm in the 5th round of next year's draft, and then there's your backup quarterback. But it'll be interesting to see because, like you said, I think it is going to come down to keeping Fromm or an Obata or a Stevenson. And I'm going to give the nod to Obata and Stevenson this year. But it'll be interesting to see how the coaching staff looks at it. So, and that we don't know.
We don't know. We do know that we're coming to an end here on the inaugural episode of the Cover One podcast. We want to thank you guys for Cover One Roundup. Did I say Cover One Roundup? I don't know. I might have short-term memory loss. Maybe have to go to the doctor. So thank you guys for listening or watching to the Cover One Roundup podcast. Again, every Monday at 9 p.m. going to be breaking down the latest news, the latest rumors, storylines. We've got you covered on everything you need to know regarding the latest and greatest when it comes to the Buffalo Bills. Want to thank our sponsor again, Underdog Fantasy. Thank you for that. Rob, anything else you want to add, and where can the people find you online?
No, I think this was a good episode. I'm looking forward to doing this once the preseason starts, and definitely in season when we can actually talk about the games and get real spicy with the takes. But you can follow me at RobQuinn619, and obviously follow all of our writers at Cover One. We got a lot in store for you this year, obviously, with the full podcast lineup. So
before we get out here, Andre Reed commented. Thank you, Andre Reed. He said, I honestly don't see Daryl Johnson or Obata getting cut, so someone else is Hughes or Addison. Whoa.
We need to bring on Andre Reed in for our hot take segment.
Hit me up in the DMs. We need to talk about this. I'll get you on next week, Andre. No questions asked. I need to know. Maybe he knows something we don't know. I love Daryl Johnson. I don't want Daryl Johnson to get cut. We'll see what happens. You can find me on Twitter at Kyle Silagyi. And again, follow Cover One, follow Rob, follow all the great people over at Cover One, Eric, Greg, Aaron, Liam, everyone. Just give them all a follow. It's a great team we've got over there. We're going to be bringing you the best coverage all season long, as Cover One has been doing for a long time now. So thank you guys for watching. I think with that, we're out. Rob, any last minute things here?
Nope, that about covers it.
All right. Thank you guys for listening / watching. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.